It's 1987. Shane Harrell is a 2-year-old living with his 6-year-old sister Crystal and mom and dad Rita and Ken in Ivanhoe, North Carolina. On October 8, 1987, Ken was tragically killed while trying to find out how fast the motorcycle he was riding would go, and instead discovering how quickly a 30-year life could end. Many years later, Shane's granddaddy, Larry, told Shane the story of the day his father died. While out working in his field in Ivanhoe, North Carolina, Larry said he was startled by the scream of a motorcycle's engine and looked up just in time to see a flash of light and sound flying down the road. He thought to himself, "Now there's a fool that's going to kill himself," and sadly, he was right. What he did not know at the time was that the fool was his son. At 22 months old, little Shane was fatherless, and he and his 6-year-old sister Crystal were left to be raised by their 27-year-old mother, Rita. Memories of his father are non-existent, but Shane does remember being on the back of a four-wheeler with his mother, Rita, and being mad that she wouldn't drive to the top of the sand dune like his older cousins did. He also recalls the day he wandered outside and wound up in a cactus patch. His mother saved him and brought him in to gently pick cactus vines from his behind while he watched Indiana Jones on television. Those precious moments with mother and son came to an abrupt end 5 months before Shane's July 1st, 1990 was a typical day in eastern North Carolina, hot and sticky with storms in the late afternoon and evening. Rita and her boyfriend were out that night and Rita was driving. For reasons one can only guess, her car ran off the road, and even though she overcorrected, she lost control and crashed into a tree, ending both of their lives. Shane saw his mother one last time as she laid in her casket, wearing a pinkish red dress with her boyfriend Kenneth's casket in the next room. At less than 5 years old, the most significant traumatic event of Shane's life had happened. He was an orphan. Fortunately, Shane and his sister Crystal were wanted, and multiple family members and close friends were willing to adopt them. They stayed for a time with their paternal grandparents, Bonnie and Larry. However, eventually, a promise between Rita and her sister-in-law, Sandra, was fulfilled, and Shane and Crystal were adopted by Sandra and Dane. They moved into a stable and happy home with Sandra and Dane, and Shane remembers feeling peaceful and happy with his new home and new parents. Life moved on for Shane and Crystal, and the next 5 years passed quietly. Sadly, their tranquility was shattered just as 1996 began. On January 2nd, 1996, Shane's grandmother Bonnie, Shane, and his sister Crystal visited Wilmington, where they were to spend a fun day with family shopping for Shane's 11th birthday. That morning, Shane and Crystal had fought over who would sit in front with Grandma, so Bonnie had the children draw straws, and Shane won the right to sit up front on the way to Wilmington. On the way home in the evening, it was Crystal's turn to sit up front, so with Shane in the back seat, they made their way to Ivanhoe through an unusually dense fog. Shane asked his grandma to switch the headlights to high beam, which she tried, but immediately realized that worsened her vision, so she switched the lights back to low beam. As a result, she never saw the stop sign, and in an instant, a log truck traveling an estimated 55 miles per hour hit her broadside, shoving the car around 300 feet down the road and into a ditch. The Oldsmobile was destroyed, and Grandma Bonnie and Crystal were killed instantly. Shane, in the back seat, was miraculously spared, though the Wilmington Star-News described the car as being horribly mangled. At 11 years old, Shane's life was spared, but this child, who had already lost both parents, was now faced with the loss of 2 of his final remaining immediate family members, Crystal and his beloved grandmother Bonnie. Since he was in the hospital with an external fixator in his leg securing his right femur and a cast on his broken left ankle and wrist, Shane missed the double closed casket funeral. He has no memory of the accident. He only recalls waking up in the hospital and being quietly told the news by Sandra, which made him so sad and in such pain, but never devastatingly so. Once again, Shane was swaddled in the love of his surrogate parents, Sandra and Dane. The entire extended family, church, and friends all gathered around Shane to try to ensure he never felt lonely or unloved. For months after the accident, he required constant care and attention for his physical wounds, and that love and affection served to heal his heart as well. Perhaps being so very young and surrounded by love allowed Shane to heal with minimal scars, both physically and emotionally. However, when it comes to coping with the succession of deaths and being a sole survivor of the horrific wreck, Shane credits his enduring faith in God. Being a Southern Baptist and having a solid foundation of faith and a staunch belief in the teachings of Jesus Christ have allowed Shane to not only survive, but thrive. As we spoke about these terrible tragedies that befell him, Shane certainly showed emotion, and his pain and feelings of loss was obvious. But his c'est la vie spirit and faith reminded me continually of Immaculée Ilibagiza. In Left to Tell, Immaculée writes, "God saved my soul and spared my life for a reason. He left me to tell my story to others and show as many people as possible the healing power of his love and forgiveness." Shane expressed the notion that God has a plan for his life and reminded me that there are worse things than dying. What is most surprising about the way Shane tells his tragic story is the amount of gratitude I hear from him. He acknowledges that the idea of being an orphan is awful, but in his case, he was immediately adopted by wonderful people who did and still do love him with all their hearts. By all accounts, his life has been good, and with the power of love and an abiding faith in God, Shane lives his life with grace and never misses an opportunity to testify. A true friend, a loving nurse, boundlessly generous, and deeply spiritual, Shane has triumphed over tragedy and blesses those who know him. However, as Dory Laub explains in Bearing Witness, or the Vicissitudes of Listening, being a co-owner of the traumatic event through my very listening carries a responsibility that cannot be ignored. In listening to Shane and bearing witness to his tragic past, I became a caretaker of his story. There are the side effects of bearing witness to such painful stories as one comes to experience the event, and for our own sakes, listeners must carefully separate ourselves enough to retain perspective and remain helpful. However, I disagree with Laub's assertion that survivors scare the listener. Perhaps in my particular case, having been a survivor of major trauma, I'm somewhat shock-proof, and like Shane and Immaculée, I believe strongly that life goes on, that there is a plan, and that we must forgive, love, heal, and move on. Those who have been wounded deeply and survived it are better equipped to handle the burden of other people's tragic histories. Personally, I'm honored to know Shane and to be able to offer him a safe place to unload the truth and the strength to share in his pain and loss. When our interview was complete and we had dried our tears, Shane hugged me tightly and thanked me for listening, a bright smile lighting his face. That smile confirmed that I had done my part as a listener and witness, for Shane seemed curiously unburdened for having told me, and I was filled with gratitude at having heard him.